Online dating horror. I had always been a skeptic of online dating, but loneliness has a way of changing your mind. So there I was, scrolling through profiles until one caught my eye. She was beautiful, almost to perfect, with a bio that read like a siren's call. We matched, and soon we were chatting every night. It became the highlight of my days. Her username was just a string of numbers and letters, nothing that gave away her identity, but I didn't mind. We talked about everything and nothing, our dreams, fears, and the mundane details of our lives. She had a way of understanding me like no one else did. It was as if she could see into my soul. One night, as the digital clock cast a haunting glow across my room, our conversation veered into uncharted territory. Her words, usually light and flirtatious, grew heavy with curiosity.
"Tell me something you've never told anyone,"
she typed, her message popping up suddenly, breaking the comfortable rhythm we had settled into. I remember pausing, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, a knot forming in the pit of my stomach. It was as if she was right there, peering into the darkest corners of my mind. With a sense of trepidation, I began to type, revealing secrets about my childhood fears, the guilt I carried from a friendship I had let slip away, and the loneliness that seemed to cling to my skin like a second shadow. Her replies came quickly, almost too quickly, as if she had been expecting my confessions.
"I understand you,"
she wrote.
"You're not alone in this."
Her words were a balm, and yet there was something chilling about the precision of her empathy, as if she wasn't just understanding my experiences, but somehow living them through me. As the nights stretched on, her inquiries delved deeper, each question a delicate incision into the fabric of my life. She asked about the heartbreaks that had left me jaded, the strained relationship with my parents, and the monotonous routine of my job that I had described in passing. Her interest was flattering, but the specificity of her questions began to unsettle me. It was as if she was cataloging my life, piece by piece. Her messages began to arrive at odd hours, times when I hadn't told her I would be awake.
"How was dinner with your brother last night?"
she asked one evening, though I had never mentioned the plans.
"You seemed distracted at work today."
She observed another time, though I hadn't shared where I worked or what I did. The red flags were there, waving in the cold light of my computer screen. But I was too caught up in the web of connection we had woven. I ignored the nagging thought that she knew things I hadn't told her, that her presence was becoming more invasive than intimate. It was only when she asked to meet at the playground from my childhood, a place I was certain I had never mentioned, that the eerie reality began to dawn on me. I was not just sharing my life with her. I was giving it away piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the echo of my own secrets bouncing back at me from the abyss of the screen.
"Let's meet at midnight at the old playground where you used to play as a child,"
she wrote. How did she know about that place? I never mentioned it. A chill ran down my spine, but the part of me that yearned for her touch silenced my fears. The playground loomed before me, a spectral remnant under the watchful gaze of a swollen moon. Its beams cast an otherworldly glow on the rusted chains of swings, swaying gently as if pushed by unseen hands. At the center stood a figure, an enigma wrapped in the night's embrace. My voice, a fragile whisper of hello, was swallowed by the thick silence. The figure stirred a slow, deliberate motion that seemed to warp the very air around it. As the moonlight caressed its form, a void where a face should have been was revealed, a smooth, featureless expanse, as if the very concept of identity had been erased. A visceral terror seized me, rooting me to the spot as the entity glided forward. It spoke, and the sound was a chilling mosaic of her messages, each syllable a fragment of our digital exchanges.
You shared your soul with me.
It murmured, the words seeping from a narrow fissure that appeared on its blank visage.
Now I am you, and you are mine.
The memory of what followed is a fractured tapestry of fear and confusion. I awoke in my own bed, the sheets soaked with the cold sweat of terror, the echo of that voice still clawing at the edges of my mind. The dating site offered no solace. Her profile had vanished, replaced by the username of Azrael6_6, a digital doppelganger bearing my likeness, my essence. I've since retreated from the online world, but the shadows linger, filled with whispers of that faceless horror. In the crowd's murmur, I sense its presence. In the static hiss of forgotten televisions, I hear its call. What it was, a specter, a demon, an entity beyond my understanding, I cannot say. But one truth haunts me relentlessly. In the realm of modern love, you risk more than heartbreak. You gamble with your very being, and the stakes are your soul, as eerie as that night might have been. This is the only thing that I could say to everyone doing the same thing as I was. Be mindful of who you share your info online, and don't just meet with anyone, especially when you're feeling as if there is a red flag, as this entity might end up being your next blind date. The screams of paralysis. It was a weekday night, and my brother and I were just about to sleep, browsing the early internet. We were both in our own worlds, chatting with friends and scrolling through our social media. That's when I stumbled upon a post suggesting that if I put my hands on my back and fell asleep that way, I could manually enter sleep paralysis and trigger that specific phenomenon by just performing the action before sleeping. As a young man, I was curious if this was true, as I didn't really believe it was possible just by doing that exact thing. I knew at the time that sleep paralysis could only occur when you're stressed or very tired. I was neither of those conditions that night, so I didn't really think I'd be able to achieve sleep paralysis just by putting my hands on my back as I slept. So my brother and I stopped browsing social media and shut off our phones. We started playing the night radio at that time. We both enjoyed listening to the radio as we slept, hearing the radio personalities and the songs they were playing. Then I tried the suggested action I saw online. I placed my hands on my back as I fell asleep, but then the impossible happened in my mind. Before I knew it, I had entered sleep paralysis. At first, I thought it was cool that I managed to enter this phase just by performing the action. I was like, that post I saw earlier was right, cool. But then the inevitable happened. I was under sleep paralysis, therefore I couldn't move. The reason I couldn't move was that my hands were actually on my back, and I couldn't move them or do anything with them as I just watched my surroundings. I could see the shelves above me, the drawer on the other side of the room, and my brother lying beside me facing the other way. I could even hear the radio playing during this time, as if I were fully aware while I was actually asleep. Then the horror began as some dark figures started appearing. At first, one was at the top of the shelf looking down at me. Then there was another figure by the side of the drawer. Finally, when I faced forward, there was another one right in my face. I screamed, but my screams made no sound at all. I screamed and screamed, trying to regain full control of my arms, but it was no use. I couldn't move them, and the dark figure in front of me wasn't leaving. I closed my eyes for a moment. Then, when I opened them again, the figures were gone. I called for my brother, who was facing away from me, but again I couldn't make a sound. By then, I realized I was still in sleep paralysis, but I didn't care at the time. I just kept on screaming in agony as the radio continued playing by my head. I kept on screaming for help and calling for my brother. I still couldn't move my arms. I couldn't move at all. I was scared that the figures might return, and screaming at my brother seemed the only rational thing to do at the time, but to no avail. My brother couldn't hear me as I couldn't produce any voice, so I screamed and screamed louder than before. But then a sudden snap happened. As I was screaming as loud as I could, I suddenly could make noise, and my brother heard my screams. But as he turned to me slowly, the terror in my mind was so agonizing that I couldn't even imagine what kind of scolding I'd get for screaming in the deep hours of the night. But that thought quickly faded as he turned around. I saw a gory face that was not my brother's. His face was all twisted and skinned, and his eyes were bulging out. It was very scary to look at him. Then I started screaming for help, as that thing beside me was not my brother at all. The only salvation I had at that time was a mere illusion I had made in my mind. That was not my brother at all. After the screaming, the rest faded from my memory. When I woke up, the radio was playing the same song as it was in that nightmare, so I knew I was aware and my mind was awake during that time. So I never dared to try that method of entering sleep paralysis again. I was not brave enough to experience that horror again. The helplessness, the agony, and the anxiety that dream gave me was not something I wanted to experience again. Truth or dare. Under the twilight begins the game innocently enough under the old oak tree in Marcel's front yard. Childhood friends Marcel, Scott, Celine, and Catherine met there with a sense of adventure in their eyes, reflected by Marcel's phone screen flicker. The digital pastime, the truth or dare app, seemed harmless. The first few rounds were filled with giggles and playful jabs. For his dare, Marcel had to reveal his most embarrassing moment involving a fifth-grade teacher and a frog. Scott was dared to run to the mailbox and back pretending he is a superhero. Celine said her secret wish was to see the world, while Catherine had to sing a nursery rhyme in an opera voice as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the yard. The game took an unexpected turn. Marcel's phone buzzed with a new dare. The screen illuminated his face, revealing the next challenge. Go to the abandoned house at the end of the street and retrieve an item from the attic. Marcel hesitated. The old house had been vacant for years, its windows boarded up, and rumors of ghostly apparitions circulated among the neighborhood kids. But this was just a silly dare, right? He glanced at his friends, who exchanged nervous glances. Scott nudged him playfully. Come on, Marcel. It's all in good fun. The moon hung low, casting eerie shadows as Marcel approached the decaying structure. The front door creaked open, protesting against its disuse. The air inside smelled of damp wood and forgotten memories. The staircase groaned under his weight as he ascended to the attic. Cobwebs clung to his face, and dust particles danced in the moonlight. In the dim attic, Marcel's flashlight revealed an old wooden chest. Heart pounding, he opened it. Inside lay a tattered journal, its pages yellowed with age. As he flipped through, he realized it belonged to a girl named Eliza, who had lived in the house decades ago. Her entries spoke of strange occurrences, sleepless nights, and a malevolent presence that haunted her dreams. Back under the oak tree, Marcel shared his discovery with his friends. Celine shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. "What if Eliza's spirit still lingers?" she whispered. "What if the dare was more than just a game?" Catherine, ever the skeptic, rolled her eyes. "Come on, guys, it's just an old journal. Probably fiction." But that night, as they lay in their sleeping bags, the room grew colder. Shadows danced on the walls, and Marcel heard faint whispers. The attic key, which he'd pocketed as a souvenir, lay heavy against his chest. Was it his imagination, or did the air shimmer with unseen energy? They made a pact then, a promise to uncover Eliza's story. Armed with Marcel's phone and the journal, they returned to the abandoned house. The attic door swung open, revealing a spectral figure, the same girl from the journal. Eliza's hollow eyes bore into Marcel's soul. She beckoned him forward.
"Help me!"
She whispered.
"Break the curse!"
And so, under the moon's watchful gaze, the childhood friends embarked on a chilling adventure, one that would unravel secrets, test their bonds, and reveal the truth behind the haunting dare. Marcel couldn't shake the feeling that Eliza's journal held more secrets. Late at night, he sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, the flickering candle casting elongated shadows. The journal lay open before him, its inked words dancing like restless spirits. Eliza's entries grew darker. She described sleepless nights plagued by a presence, an unseen entity that whispered malevolence. "It watches me," she wrote. Its eyes burned like dying stars. Marcel's skin prickled. Was this just fiction, or had Eliza truly encountered something otherworldly? Determined to unravel the mystery, Marcel enlisted his friends. Scott, the tech-savvy one, hacked into old town records. Eliza's family had vanished without a trace, leaving behind the cursed house. Catherine, the bookworm, delved into folklore. She discovered tales of a vengeful spirit, a woman betrayed by her lover, forever bound to the earthly realm. Celine, the empathetic soul, insisted they visit Eliza's grave. They stood there, under a moonless sky, the wind carrying whispers. "She's waiting," Celine said, tears glistening, "waiting for someone to break the curse." Back in the attic, Marcel spread Eliza's journal on the dusty floor. The room seemed to pulse with energy. They recited the incantation, the words Eliza had penned in desperation. The air thickened, and the candle flames danced wildly. Shadows coalesced into a figure, a woman with hollow eyes. "Eliza," Marcel whispered, "we're here to help." The spirit's gaze bore into him.
"Break the curse!"
She rasped.
"Free me!"
The final dare loomed, the one that would either save Eliza or damn them all. Marcel held the attic key, its metal cold against his palm. The others watch, breathless. He stepped toward the window, the same window Eliza had leapt from, seeking release. Marcel, no, Celine cry. But he climbed onto the sill, the wind tugging at his clothes, the moon bathed him in silver. I'll take her place, he vowed. Eliza, find peace. And as he plummeted, the curse shattered. Eliza's spirit dissipated, and the house trembled. Marcel's friends caught him, tears streaming. The old oak tree rustled, as if whispering its approval. In the aftermath, the house crumbled, its curse broken. Marcel kept Eliza's journal, a reminder of their pact. They never played truth or dare again, but their bond deepened. And sometimes, on moonless nights, Marcel felt Eliza's presence, a whisper of gratitude. The childhood friends had unraveled a haunting dare, but they'd gained something more, a connection that transcended time and death. Blackouts. I'm not one to jump to supernatural explanations for unexplained events, but I don't know where else to turn for answers. It began with small things being moved around my home. At first, it was subtle, keys appearing on a different table or clothes on my bed instead of the chair. Then it escalated. I found items in the most random places, keys in the fridge, ice cream in the oven. But it didn't stop there. The day I discovered forks arranged in a manner that is very unexplainable on my living room floor was when I realized something was very wrong. I confronted my roommate, even though he wasn't home, and these events occurred. He denied everything and threatened to move out if I kept accusing him. With no evidence to the contrary, I had to let it go. Desperate for answers, I traced the timeline of these strange events back to when I began auto-writing. Auto-writing is a technique where you enter a meditative state and write without thinking, letting your subconscious flow onto the paper. I had tried it to overcome a severe case of writer's block. While it worked remarkably well, it also brought about unsettling consequences. The most disturbing aspect was reading back what I had written, words in a style entirely unlike my own. Letters curved as if I were left-handed, the vocabulary and grammar alien. On several occasions, I blacked out and had no memory of writing at all. Yet, the ideas were excellent, and I pressed on, undeterred. The strange events in my house coincided with these blackouts. Cabinets left open, empty bottles I hadn't drunk from. After some research, I concluded that I had somehow invited something in through auto-writing. I wanted to stop, but the method was too effective for my writing. It all started innocently enough. I'd sit at my desk, blank page before me, and enter a meditative state. My hand would move almost on its own, scribbling words that seemed to come from somewhere deep within my subconscious. At first, it was liberating. The writer's block that had plagued me for months melted away, replaced by a torrent of creativity. But then strange things started to happen. I'd find objects moved from where I'd left them. My keys would be in the bathroom, my shoes under the kitchen table. It was disconcerting, but I chalked it up to absent-mindedness. Everyone misplaces things from time to time, right? As the days went on, the occurrences grew more frequent and bizarre. I found my wallet in the freezer, my phone in the garage. One morning, I woke to find all the chairs in the living room arranged in a circle. I laughed it off, thinking maybe my roommate was playing pranks on me. But when I asked him, he swore he had nothing to do with it and looked genuinely confused and a bit scared. Then came the forks again. One night, I came home late after a particularly grueling day at work. Exhausted, I kicked off my shoes and headed to the kitchen for a quick dinner. When I turned on the light, my heart nearly stopped. There, on the kitchen floor, were all the forks from the drawer, arranged in a perfect circle. It was too deliberate, too precise to be random. A chill ran down my spine as I stared at the eerie pattern. I confronted my roommate one more time, convinced he was behind it. But he denied it vehemently, his frustration turning to anger. He threatened to move out if I didn't stop accusing him. With no evidence to prove otherwise, I was forced to drop it. As the disturbances continued, I became more desperate for answers. I started keeping a journal, meticulously recording every odd event, every misplaced item. I installed cameras around the house, hoping to catch whatever was responsible. But the footage showed nothing, no intruders, no signs of my roommate tampering with anything. It was as if the objects moved on their own. It was then that I began to suspect the auto-writing. I had read about people channeling spirits or entities through this method, but I had dismissed it as nonsense. Now I wasn't so sure. I went back through my notebooks, examining the entries. The handwriting varied, sometimes dramatically. Some entries were neat and precise, others wild and erratic. And the content, some of it didn't even seem like it came from me. Dark, violent imagery, thoughts I would never entertain. I decided to do some research. I read about possession, hauntings, and the idea of opening a door to another realm through auto-writing. It all seemed far-fetched, but I couldn't ignore the growing evidence. The timeline of the disturbances matched perfectly with when I started the auto-writing. The more I wrote, the worse things became. I wanted to stop, but I was addicted to the creativity it unlocked. My writing was better than it had ever been. I was getting praise from peers, interest from publishers. It felt like I had struck gold, but at what cost? The unease grew into a palpable fear, but I pushed it aside. I needed to write. I needed the ideas, the flow, the inspiration. So, like an idiot, I continued. Then things got worse. My blackouts lengthened, and entire days passed without my awareness. Friends said I acted like a different person during these times. My mannerisms, speech, even my quirks changed. Some recorded videos of me, and watching myself in them was horrifying. I was there, but it wasn't me. A psychologist ruled out schizophrenia and multiple personality disorder. Brain scans showed nothing unusual. With no other options, I visited a medium. She sensed another presence and suggested possession, but mentioned the word brother repeatedly. Skeptical yet curious, I asked my mother if I had any unknown siblings. To my shock, she admitted I had an older brother, Brendan. "Before you were born, you had a brother," she said, eyes filled with tears. "Brendan was born before me and was a nightmare from the start. As a baby, he cried incessantly, and as he grew, he became violent and hateful. By 9, he tried to kill my mother and was institutionalized. Diagnosed with violent compulsions, he was a psychopath with no apparent cause. 8 years ago, he was killed by an orderly in self-defense. The most chilling part, before dying, He used his blood to write a vow of revenge on the wall. Armed with this knowledge, I contacted the medium again, and we held a seance. During it, I lost control of my body. I watched in terror as I, or rather Brendan controlling me, strangled the medium. Dumping her body in a river, Brendan's thoughts mingled with mine. He had waited for the chance to be invited in, and auto-writing provided that gateway. He took me home to wait for my roommate, planning torture and murder. I couldn't allow this. In a desperate struggle, I willed myself to call 911. As Brendan fought for control, I grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed myself, hoping to either die or get incarcerated, thus stopping him. I woke in a hospital, relieved Brendan's voice was gone. Despite my confession, no one believed me. I was sent to prison, where I hoped my family was safe. Months passed without incident, and I began to believe Brendan was gone for good. But then, writing these memoirs, I discovered a journal and a finely sharpened shiv under my bed, items I hadn't made. With trembling hands, I read the first entry. "Dear brother, I hope you never find this, but if you do, tell Mom I said hey for me, and hope to see her soon. Nail obsession." The old house stood at the edge of the woods, its time-worn facade cloaked in shadows. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Inside, the family of 6 lived in eerie harmony, bound by a sinister secret. Randy and Petey, the first 2 children, had an insatiable craving for nails. Not the shiny, manicured ones you find in hardware stores, but their own gnarled, jagged nails. They'd chew them down to the quick, leaving bloody crescents on their fingertips. Their mother, Evelyn, watched in horror as they devoured their own flesh, but she couldn't tear her eyes away. It was as if some unseen force compelled her to allow it. Evelyn's husband, Henry, was oblivious to their strange habit. He spent his days working in the dimly lit study, poring over ancient texts and deciphering cryptic symbols. The children's obsession with nails seemed insignificant compared to the arcane mysteries he sought to unravel. The house itself seemed to conspire with their bizarre compulsion. Its walls bore the scars of countless nail-biting sessions, the faded wallpaper stained with rusty streaks. The floorboards creaked underfoot, as if echoing the children's insatiable hunger. Evelyn tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. She kept the children indoors, away from prying eyes. But the neighbors whispered about the strange family that never ventured outside, their windows perpetually shuttered. As the moon waxed and waned, the children's behavior grew more erratic. They prowled the hallways at night, their eyes gleaming like feral animals. Evelyn lay awake, listening to their soft footsteps, wondering what dark force had taken hold of her family. She glimpsed them in the moonlight, huddled together in the attic, their mouths stained crimson. One night, she followed them. The attic smelled of rust and decay. Candlelight flickered, casting elongated shadows on the walls. The children sat in a circle, their hands outstretched, offering their blooded nails to an unseen entity. Evelyn's heart pounded as she realized they weren't alone. Something ancient and hungry watched from the shadows, feeding off their pain. And so the nail-eating obsession consumed them all, the children, the house, and Evelyn herself. The curse had woven its tendrils deep into their lives, and escape seemed impossible. The walls whispered secrets, and the moon bore witness to their nightly rituals. Evelyn knew she had to act, but the darkness clung to her like a second skin. Years passed, and the family grew. Jonathan and Mikey arrived, their eyes wide with curiosity. Their arrival coincided with the changing seasons, the air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves. The old house seemed to welcome them, its creaking floorboards echoing their footsteps. Jonathan, the older of the two, had inherited his father's analytical mind. His fascination with the house's history led him to explore its nooks and crannies. He discovered faded photographs in the attic, faces frozen in time, their eyes hauntingly familiar. Were they distant relatives, or perhaps former occupants of this very house? The sepia-toned images reveal glimpses of lives lived long ago. A woman in a high-collared dress, her eyes filled with secrets. A man with a handlebar mustache, his gaze piercing through the ages. Mikey, on the other hand, possessed an artist's soul. His sketches adorned the walls, the twisted branches of the ancient oak tree, the moon casting eerie shadows on the garden path. But it was his drawings of the children that sent shivers down Evelyn's spine. Their eyes, hollow and hungry, seemed to pierce through the paper. Mikey's charcoal strokes captured their desperation, their need to consume, to satiate a hunger that defied reason. The siblings developed the same nail-eating addiction. The house echoed with the sound of crunching bones as they nibbled on their own fingers and toes. The siblings competed fiercely, vying for their parents' attention. Who could consume the most nails? Who could leave the least evidence behind? Their tiny hands trembled as they tore at their cuticles, their eyes wild with a primal hunger. Evelyn tried to hide her children to the world once again, but the neighbors continued to spread rumors about the house. The once vibrant garden now lay neglected, its roses withering under the weight of secrets. Evelyn tended to the wilted blooms, her fingers brushing against thorns that mirrored her own pain. As the moon shined the sky, the children's behavior grew more erratic. They prowled the hallways at night, their eyes gleaming like feral animals. Evelyn lay awake, listening to their footsteps, wondering what horror was on the table once more. She glimpsed them in the moonlight, huddled together in the attic, their mouths stained crimson. Their whispers blended with the rustling of moth-eaten curtains, the incantations of a hunger that transcended mere sustenance. She followed them once more. The attic smelled of rust and decay. Candlelight flickered, casting elongated shadows on the walls. The children gathered within the table in the attic, having dinner, their faces twisted and scarred by their jagged, crusty nails that they have been munching on with an unseen entity, as if it is a part of this house, this family, and a part of her children's. Its presence weighed upon her, a malevolence that seeped into her bones. The entity reveled in their suffering, its hunger insatiable. It whispered forgotten incantations, urging the children to consume more. Jonathan and Mikey, their eyes glazed, chewed on their own flesh, oblivious to their mother's horrified gaze. The attic walls seemed to pulse with malevolence, as if absorbing their agony. Evelyn clutched her own hands, her nails digging into her palms. She wondered if she, too, should offer herself to the unseen force to save her children or to join them in their desperate communion. But sanity prevailed. Evelyn knew she had to act. She consulted her husband, Henry, who reluctantly revealed the truth. The house was built on an ancient burial ground, a place where restless souls hungered for corporeal experiences. The curse had seeped into their very bones, driving them toward madness. Henry, too, had felt its pull, the insatiable urge to offer his own nails to the unseen entity. Together they devised a plan. They would perform a cleansing ritual, banishing the spirit back to the netherworld. But the children resisted, their eyes wild with hunger. They lunged at their parents, teeth bared, nails sharp. Evelyn and Henry fought back, their love for their children warring with the need to survive. The attic became a battleground, a place of blood and whispered pleas. As the moon reached its zenith, they chanted incantations, their voices trembling. The walls trembled, and the air crackled with energy. The children wailed, their bodies contorting. And then, with a final surge of power, the spirit was expelled, leaving behind only silence. The attic walls sagged, exhausted from witnessing the struggle. The house stood empty now, waiting for new occupants, unaware of the horrors that lay dormant within its time-worn walls. Thank you for tuning in. Please leave a like and subscribe, and special thanks to Short Story 1 for submitting their story. I will see you again next week.